Hello and welcome back to Chess Month, a special season on Shut Up and Sit Down where we look at two-player head-to-head games, shining a bright light onto that corner of the world, asking it some frankly difficult questions. This week I am here with Cairn, possibly my favourite game in the tactical Druid rugby chess genre. And as you can tell, I've prepared for today's review by living as a Druid for the past 400 years, wearing a t-shirt that has a picture of a bird on it, and obviously I've also been playing this game. This small box from Matago was designed by Christian Martinez, designer of Shut Up and Sit Down favourite, and a personal real favourite of mine, Inish. And so inside the box, which is, as always, quite a bit bigger than it needed to be, you've got a really quite modest selection of things. Most notable being these plastic miniatures, which are 50% delightful. The bright blue goblin folk with funny hats and sometimes birds on their hats are just absolutely 2 thumbs up. Brilliant, I love them. Meanwhile, the brown, twiggy, traditional druid folk are just sort of... Crucially though, these plastic pieces aren't just superfluous set dressing fluff. They're a joy to pick up and hold and move around, and doing so is literally all of the game. And initially, that game is pretty simple. You can do one of 3 actions as marked by these little tiles down here. You can move a shaman in 2 different ways. One of the move types, just move them. Another one lets you hop over a shaman that's already in place. And the third thing you can do, well, you can just spawn in another of your shaman from the back line into one of your 2 little spawn slots. Not going to use that phrase ever again. But here is the rub, and this is the first of a very small number of rubs that will nonetheless leave you chafed into oblivion. You see, these 3 actions, these tiles, every time you use them, they get flipped, and on the opposite side of them is a very slightly different version of that initial movement. So, for example, we have movement here. You can move orthogonally with this one, but as soon as someone does that, it gets flipped over. And now, the next person who wants to use that one has to move diagonally, jumping over someone. Initially, it might be jumping over one of your friendly units. After that, though, it gets flipped, and next time someone uses it, they have to jump over an enemy unit. And finally, this ability to spawn in new shamans onto your side of the chess rugby pitch. White dots and black dots, signifying which of these different locations on your side you're actually allowed to currently add a piece to. So already there are 3 actions, but actually there are 6 actions. And just like with Inish, a game that initially fills your hands with unknown cards, but by the end of the first round you're familiar with all of them, Cairn takes mere minutes before both players are 100% aware of what all of these actions are and what's on the other side of them, leaving you then tangoing with a pillar of increasingly stacked, wobbly possibilities. You're never just doing a thing, you're doing a thing and then flipping the tile, and then trying to be aware of the implications of doing that, because in addition to these 3 actions, there is a 4th tile, just out of camera shot here. Ooh. If you end an action and the currently flipped side of this tile, because yes, of course, this has 2 different constantly flipping objectives as well. If you end with a formation of pieces which matches that tile, and you can point it on the board, then you can immediately banish an enemy shaman, sending them away forever. They're not actually being killed, don't worry. Like, you know, druids don't ever really die. Take it from me. You know, like, you might get reincarnated as a twig and then have to be a twig for years. But eventually you move on from that and you forget about that and you get back in the game. Hopefully the kind of human or semi-intelligent animal game. But no, they're not dead. They don't even have to spend a really, really long time being a twig. They simply go back to your side of the board, ready to be redeployed on one of your later turns. And so immediately, with so few components and not a deck of cards in sight, you've got something almost akin to a drafting game here. A two-player head-to-head thing where actually sometimes it just makes more sense to deny your opponent the thing that they want to do than it does to try and work out what you want to do yourself. So, for example here, I know that this little chap is safe because the movement tile currently is set to be horizontal. But I know that if I do a horizontal movement, flipping it over to being diagonal, well, this blue chap here is going to move there and that's going to banish my character. But it's fine, because as long as I keep an eye on it and as long as I make sure that I don't use that, they can't do it. Or if they do use it on their turn and flip it over, I just need to remember to immediately then use the other side of that movement, so when it goes back to them, they're still stuck with horizontal movement. Except everything's constantly changing. You can't use one of these actions unless you can use them, and you very rarely end up with a stalemate. In fact, more often than not, your choices are going to be quite limited in a turn, but not limited by the game per se. Look, the thing that I really love about Cairn is that you are always being restricted about what you can do on a turn. But these restrictions are kind of self-imposed, self-invented. You think, well, I can't do that because. You're stepping ahead 3 or 4 turns, which means when you work out what you have to do, it almost feels like the only option, but because it's a home-brewed bottleneck and not one that's being seemingly imposed externally by the game, it feels like you're in control. Importantly though, it crunches away some of that analysis paralysis and does just keep the game chortling along, chugging along at a delightful pace. Because a game of Druid Rugby tactical chess doesn't actually take that long. It's about 20-25 minutes. If you manage to banish an enemy shaman, that's a point. If you manage to get one of your shaman across the board, shamalama ding dong, that's a point. You get 3 points, you've won the game. That's it. It's over. Now listen. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Matt, you keep talking about this game as if it's a complicated game. It doesn't seem that complicated to me, you know? I mean, you might also be thinking, hey Matt, are you lying on the floor? Or like, hey Matt, is your table now just a piece of wood with some felt on it on a kind of broken office chair? Or like, hey Matt, did you cut your own hair? And even if you did, could you not have cut some more of it off? And like, yeah. But you're probably mainly thinking, Matt, this game doesn't sound that complicated. And that's because, like a sneaky git, I've been keeping the truth from you and I literally haven't told you about half of the game. So let's talk about that. So these are megaliths, massive chunks of rock that get plunked onto the board and immediately change everything. Each one of these stones has a unique power that activates when a piece gets moved onto it. Basic stuff like step onto it and then get to move that piece again once in any direction. Over to the more complicated. Step onto this piece and then immediately swap the location of 2 different megaliths, including the one that you're on potentially. And the basic tiles aren't too taxing. This one lets you immediately take a second turn. You've got one that teleports you to another megalith, one that lets you banish adjacent enemy shamans or move a different adjacent shaman of yours a single space. But yeah, the other monolith tiles with the darker grey circle on them really aren't messing about. You've got one that lets you step on it and then move another monolith around. You've got one that when you step on it lets you immediately change any one of the monoliths on the board and swap it out for one of the 2 that's incoming into the game, which could quite quickly get you into a pickle. You've got one that even lets you move the enemy's shaman on your turn. And perhaps it's pure simplicity, but my favourite, just for brutality, is the one that if anyone steps on it at any point, they're immediately banished. Now each of these individually aren't any problem at all, but you won't be dealing with them individually. At the start of the game, there will be 2 placed in the middle of the board, and then every time anyone scores a point, either by banishing an enemy shaman or moving their piece off the edge of the other side of the board, they will choose and add another one from the available 2, and then stocking up a new one, which means If it takes 3 points to win, then it means you got 2 on to begin, which means you've got a potential in a game that you'll end up with six of these different things all along this board. And you know what? These actions can and will stack. So you'll move one, which will let you move one, which will let you teleport one, which will let you move an enemy piece onto the slot, which will banish them. And yeah, you can see it's already going to get quite complicated. And that's not even to mention the fact, I don't know if you've noticed, but this board is really quite small. I'll just twist it, move around. I've got my head in a plant. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm really compressing myself into a corner here just so I can show you everything. But this board is really quite small. And you've got 10 figurines. You've got potentially 6 of these horrible megaliths that do wonderful and terrifying things. And that's not even to mention the fact that the 2 spawn slots on either side, the white and black slots that let you bring in new people, if an enemy is standing on one of those and then you summon in one of yours into that slot, you immediately banish them. And yeah, it's not a lot of space, and you're going to be crushed in with possibilities and problems remarkably quickly. Now, from the tone of my voice, you may have already kind of sussed out that I really, really love this game. It's kind of like if chess had a baby with chaos, but maybe chess had been in some sort of really serious accident prior to that, because honestly, it's really not that much like chess anymore. Look, but what this is, right, is a razor-sharp battle of wits that lasts about 20 minutes. You know the game, you know Chicken, right? Not the bird, not the food, the game Chicken. That kind of quasi-folk game where humans run at each other or drive at each other as fast as they possibly can to see which one of them will. Humans are actually pretty weird, aren't we? But look, listen, this game is like brain chicken. The first few rounds, not a problem, easy. But baked into this game is an intense acceleration. Every time anything happens, it gets more complicated. And you stack up these complexities atop each other until it just becomes this wobbly mess waiting for one of you to crack under pressure and make a mistake. And then it's over. Doesn't outstay its welcome. You get about 5 to 10 minutes of hardcore crunching. And then that's it. And you know, these megaliths and the randomness of having a big stack of them and not using the same ones each time adds a wonderful texture to the game. Each game you play feels a little bit different in terms of flow and feel. And just like with Cosmic Encounter, that also has a lot of randomness that changes the game from game to game, some of the games of Cairn you play are going to be these incredible, intense, mind-bending epics, and some of them are just going to be a bit of a wash, where you end up having a bit of an unfair board state. Maybe, and I've had games where maybe you just end up putting down some Cairns and then it's like, oh, I don't think there's anything you can do to beat me here. I've just kind of won. But unlike with games of Cosmic, where your ongoing strategy can have time to sour, tactical mistakes, whatever. Yeah, like I messed up. I guess let's just go again. It takes literally seconds to reset the board. Should we just play again? It's the timing here that's crucial. If this game went on for an hour, it would be awful. But 20 minutes is just right. With that amount of time, you can't beat yourself up for making a stupid mistake. And in fact, making a stupid mistake is the heart of the game. It's the only way the game works. It just gets more and more complicated until your brain just stops working. You're trying to do ballet in a jacuzzi full of banana peels. And frankly, a lot of the other ballet dancers don't have your best interest at heart. Get out of the jacuzzi now. Can you believe it? This is an easy recommendation for Shut Up and Sit Down. I mean, yeah, like you might argue that, well, of course, he likes this game about viciously battling it out for the love of nature. He's somebody who looks like he's been wrestling the shrubbery. And that's a fair criticism. But you know what? This is a hugely British reference now, but this game to me feels like a caravan game. All right? Feels like it's raining outside, it's just you and someone else, and there's nothing to do. And you get this out and you could play this all night. You could play this for days, over and over again. a battle of the wits, just short enough for one more game. And that's kind of the point of Chess Month. We're doing Chess Month to try and encourage people as part of social distancing in this pandemic, for the same reason I'm cutting my own hair. Just keep it low key. Let's just hold off on Twilight Imperium 8-player, just for the time being. My only real complaints about this game are pretty basic. I mean, yeah, like we say it all the time, I think it's just the right size of game. I'd prefer a smaller box, but you know, broken records are going to break, etc. Honestly, it's really dumb, but I think the only thing about this game that kind of winds me up is it's called Cairn, and yet it's full of megaliths. Megaliths are really big rocks, right? And cairns are stacks of lots of little rocks on top of each other. And there aren't really any cairns in this game. I don't really know why it's called Cairn. You know, I looked it up online again, and I found out Cairn's a type of dog as well, but there aren't any of those dogs in this game. So, I don't know what that's about. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video review of Cairn. If you love the idea of this horrible head-to-head complexity off, you should also check out Tigris and Euphrates, which is a game that's equally complicated, goes on for much longer, but it's so good. It's so good. You're not going to get it to the table as often as Cairn, but when you do, when you do. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back next week with a little bit more Chess Month. Bye!